Pivar, Brattleboro's community talk show. I'm Wendy O'Connell. Thanks for joining us for another episode. This is number 75, and I'm happy to say that our guest today is Marjorie Pivar. Marjorie has traveled the world exploring other cultures through music and dance and spirituality. She's a certified Shiatsu therapist and has practiced in Brattleboro for over 30 years. Marjorie also established the Shiatsu School of Vermont here on High Street, where she's both teacher and practitioner, and also has incorporated Zen Shiatsu Express. So we're going to be talking about these things today. Hi, Marjorie.
Hi, Wendy.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you too.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah.
I've got to say, I stopped in to talk to Marjorie the other day at her Zen school, and it's really beautiful. It's a wonderful space. It's really welcoming, and it's really beautiful, and it's fun to be in. So just to throw that out. We'll have credits at the end of the show as well. So Marjorie, going back, when you were a teenager, I think like most of us, you were in search of something, not knowing exactly what it was. And you got into the environment a bit. What spurred that interest?
It was in the 70s, and I lived in Long Island, and we had our first McDonald's ever. And it was a fun thing to do. It was exciting. So, your parents say, okay, everyone get in the car. We're going to eat at McDonald's, and to the drive-through. Mm-hmm. And that was fun. So we'd go through the drive-through, and the kids in the back seat, we'd all eat our McDonald's while we were driving, and it was so fun. And then you just roll down your window and you throw all your papers and all your wrappers out the window. Right. And that was what everyone did. That was what you do. I mean, it was even fun to do it. You roll down your window and you throw your stuff out. And that's what everyone did. Yeah. And I don't know how long before it occurred to me that was really weird. Mm-hmm. And so it was like I was saying to everybody, wait, we can't dump our junk out the window. That's wrong. That's littering. That's bad for the environment. And I ended up starting a club at my high school called the Environmental Action Group, or whatever it was. And the only thing that we were going to do was tell people to stop throwing their McDonald's wrappers out the window. That's great. Because that's all there was. That's all we knew about.
Around that time, you also started doing different readings of different kind of philosophies.
I had these friends from Texas, and they had a Texas accent, and they were really cool. They were two sisters, and they were my friends. And their older brother gave me, I don't remember why, but he gave me a Tao Te Ching mm-hmm. book, and I guess I must have had a crush on him or something, but I considered that to be, I don't know why he did, but I considered that having that book was a treasure. Mm. Yeah.
You started reading it then, and it definitely spoke to you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all mysterious.
Yes.
But it seems to have some wisdom in it. Mm-hmm. That's mysterious. Mm-hmm. My interest in environmentalism, my school guidance counselor or somebody contacted the first environmentalist college that opened up, and it must have been in the late 70s, mm-hmm. and they recommended me or something, or maybe they gave me an application to fill out, and they were only accepting 25 people for their first class in environmental studies, and I was accepted. But something happened that derailed that plan, which was I wasn't getting along with my father. We were having arguments every night. He's not an easy person, whatever. But my mother had this great idea. Let's send Marjorie to France as a student abroad mm-hmm. for about almost a year or 9 months or something. I was really just hitchhiking around Europe, and I went off the map, mm-hmm. and I was having an adventure.
It was the 70s, so traveling alone in Europe was very different then than it is now. And what was that like for you?
I had no fear. I believed in engaging people. I believed that I could engage the good part of anybody. Yeah. But I did have to fight off a few. There were some dangerous situations that I did have to be very, vigilant and brave and kind of get myself out of them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And but it didn't stop me. It didn't make me afraid. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you went to a lot of different countries, and you it was almost like a quest in some ways, it seems like.
I had a boyfriend from Spain, and he was a draft dodger, so he didn't want to be drafted into the Spanish army, so he ran away to France. And he had all these strategies for living, so I really traveled a lot with him. I went off the map, and my mother was scared. She tried to find me. You know, that was a time when if you wanted to make a phone call overseas, you had to go into a telecommunications office, and then you had to get a booth, and you had to. It wasn't easy.
Yeah.
So I think I must have written to her or something, and she knew I was still alive. But you know, she begged me to come back. So I came back. It was during that time I felt like I didn't belong in America. I had been really imprinted by Europe. I loved Europe. I didn't belong. I thought America was very crass. It didn't have culture, a kind of a culture that I became accustomed to.
Were you attracted to any culture, any other cultures?
I was living in a house where my roommates were learning Irish music, and that was Kathy Torrey. I don't know if you know her, but a lot of people know her. So she was my roommate, and so I started to play Irish music, and then I got all involved in that, and then I went to Ireland, and I went to find my favorite flute player in Galway, and I just really became Irish. Then I came back. I adopted like the Irish culture or something that I loved. I went to live in New York City, and I joined an Irish club. I used to go there and play Irish music, but I noticed when I went in, it was really dark, and they painted barbed wire on the walls, and it was like, we're occupied. We're like Belfast. We're like not Southern Ireland. We're like Northern Ireland, and we're occupied, and we're, you know, repressed, and that's what their mentality was like that. And so I thought, okay, goodbye. I'm done with this culture, with this part of that culture. I worked as a bartender in a Japanese Chinese restaurant in Wall Street. That was fun because it was a lunch break restaurant, and at the bar you would have the custodians, the mail people, and the workers. Then you'd have the CEOs and the directors and the managers, and they'd all be in the bar at the same. They'd be drinking partners. So I thought that was really great, and I'm like the Jewish mother. So like on my part of the bar, the ones who wanted, because I would say, oh, do you want a little more? Oh, do you want a little more? Like I was just loading up their glasses. Like I was oblivious. I was like only, I don't know, 19.
Right.
And the other side of the bar, there was a different person, and she was taking bets. So they were either the ones who wanted to take bets went on her side, and the ones that wanted to get really wasted were on my side. I love music and dance. So I had my first boyfriend was an African American, very amazing jazz drummer. And I used to go hang out at his house, at his loft on Avenue D in 10th Street. And all of these like Elvin Jones and, you know, these really famous jazz people were there. And but sometimes when they were talking, I couldn't understand their language. They had a kind of like a Creole, a jazz kind of Creole language. And I really didn't understand it at all. Then I started homesteading a building with some Puerto Rican people, and I became like an honorary Puerto Rican person. I spoke Spanish with the Puerto Rican accent. We were homesteading a burnt out building. We were fixing it up and everything, and I had roommates, Puerto Rican roommates in where I was living, and I was Puerto Rican until one day when I went into this boutique on 2nd Avenue called the Bear and Bow. It was a Brazilian boutique. I walked in there, and the Brazilian person said to me, "Oi," and I went, "I'm Jewish." So I was like, "What do you mean, oi?" And that's how you say hi in Portuguese. So then he started saying all these things that was like it was like Spanish, but with like a Jewish accent. It was like it had like more. So I was more honing in on more that I was like. Well, maybe I'm not like this kind of culture, but maybe I'm a little bit more this way. So then I went to Capoeira and I learned Portuguese, and then I met my son's father, and I got married to a Brazilian man. Yeah.
And so all of those experiences, you were exploring, right? You were exploring different ways of being and different cultures, and that's a pretty interesting way to go about it. You immersed yourself.
See, I was very alone. I didn't really have contact with my parents. So that's why I was looking for a family. Like, they didn't call me or something to see how I was. Like, months would go by or something. I just really felt like I needed a family, and that's probably why I was doing that. So one of the things I did was I started to take Tai Chi twice a week and regularly, and I noticed that it was doing something really amazing to my body. One of the things it did was help me defend myself when I was attacked. There was an incident when a man was trying to drag me up to the roof of my building on the Lower East Side. I was trying to run down the stairs, but he kept grabbing and grabbing and grabbing down 4 flights of stairs to drag me up to the roof. But I snaked out of everyone, and so that was my Tai Chi. So I realized that Tai Chi had transformed my reflexes and my sensibilities, and it made me. I liked how it made me be. And then I went to a lecture on Shiatsu at the New School for Social Research, and I saw Ohashi. I realized that Shiatsu was like continuing the Tai Chi and continuing the Tao Te Ching, and it was like I could tell that was my direction, that had a lot of growth and depth and wisdom, and it was something that I felt like it was my calling.
Margie, how did you end up in Vermont? You were in New York City. How'd you get here?
Well, when I was going to my Tai Chi class, there was a friend in my Tai Chi class who noticed that I was, by then, a single mother with a 2-year-old son. And she came up to me and she said, you know, I have a friend who's a single father with a 2-year-old son. His name is Derek, you know, and it was Derek. And so she kind of got us together.
You met Derek in New York, and then he had a connection to Vermont.
He went to Bennington College, and he got very much into identifying native plants and things. So he has a natural sixth sense for ginseng. So if he's walking through the woods, he can sense if the environment is conducive for ginseng. He can like look at the color of the soil, and he can look at the companion plants, and he can look at the amount of light and the amount of moisture, and he'll say, I bet you ginseng's here.
Wow.
And he has a sixth sense. So he realized that the birds, when the seeds come up, they're bright red, and the birds eat them right like that because they're very bright, easy to see. So he decided that, you know, I think I'll just get here before the birds. So he had a schedule every fall that he would go to the woods into these patches that he had found, and he wanted to make sure he got those seeds under the ground. And so he really cultivated a large ginseng patches. And he was really, you know, he oversees these places.
Right. Some years later, you wrote a book called Fourth Uncle in the Mountain. And it did really quite well. It was a most unusual book, a really wonderful read. Can you talk a little bit about that book? It came out in 2004?
2002, and then it went into paperback in 2006.
Yeah.
Yes. So, what happened was, as I said, Derek went to Bennington, and one of his best friends was teaching music in Bennington, and he used to see this Vietnamese man walking around the campus nibbling on all the shrubs, like tasting this one, and then he's tasting that one, all over the campus. So he went over and asked him, what are you doing? And he said, well, I want to know if this is medicine. And so, so then he said, well, you know, would you like to see our ginseng? And then he called us and he said, would you take this man I met, his name is Wang, would you take, he asked my husband, Derek, would you take him to see ginseng so he could sample our ginseng? And so he brought him over to our house, and I went along in the woods, and one of the things he said that's really struck me was that, well, he didn't speak English hardly at all. Like, nobody could understand him except for me, really, very well. But he said, what do you do when you see a tiger? And then I said, I don't know, what do you do? And he said, well, you unbutton your shirt, and you take 3 steps back, and you get really big like that, and never turn your back on the tiger. And he goes, what do you do? We don't have tigers. Then I realized that he didn't really know, he was from another world. He didn't really know much about our country or whatever.
Was he a doctor in Vietnam, an herbalist kind of doctor? So he came to America with that kind of knowledge.
He was a very special person in Vietnam. That's why I wrote the book, because I realized he's somebody that should have his story preserved, because at the outbreak of the war in Vietnam, his parents were one of the first casualties, because his father was a monk his father refused to be drafted by the French, and he ran away with his old sweetheart, and they were living in the jungle, hiding, But then the French hunted him down and killed both of them. But before they did, she was able to drop him off in the market. And he was only 3 months old. And then that day, this man adopted Wang and taught him medicine, was 64 years old. And he was the most very, very high-level, beloved, kind of like enlightened monk and doctor. He came from a family lineage that would meditate with a master in the cave. It was like a Yoda. He lived in the cave for 25 years. He had such a highly developed consciousness. So after we went on the ginseng walk, it was almost a coincidence that my son was 10 at the time. He developed this very bad pain in his hip, and I brought him to all doctors. Make a long story short, none of them could diagnose him. So I said, well, I think I'll bring him to Wang. And Wang said he drew a picture of what was happening in his hip. He said he has an infection there. He knew how it got there. And I said, good, well, can you treat him? And he said, no. He said, this is life-threatening. You really should go get Western medicine. And so I called the hospital, the best pediatric orthopedic doctor in New York City. They misdiagnosed him twice. As a matter of fact, I had to tell them what Wang told me. I was saying to the best doctors in the whole of New York, I was saying, you're wrong. I know you're wrong because my Vietnamese friend told me that it's this. So then they found out it was that.
And he got well.
And he got well.
And so your experience with him after that, what was that like?
So I feel like he saved my son's life. So I said, you know, you saved my son's life, what can I do for you? So he had escaped as a boat person, a very dangerous journey. He left his wife behind. And so I said, he hadn't seen her in 10 years. And he was pining away for her. But she was stuck because it's a communist country and it was really hard. So I said, okay, I promise you I'm going to get your wife here. And then during the next 4 years, I wrote a stack of letters I got the help of Bernie Sanders and Patrick Leahy, and both of them wrote the letters. I would say this in your letter, and then they would type it on their stationery and they would send it over. And so, but it was back and forth for 4 years.
Wow.
So she finally got over here. During that time, I realized what an amazing doctor. He wasn't only an amazing doctor for my son. Oh, he was working as a janitor, as doing laundry in a veteran hospital. He was working, you know, not a job for what he really is. So I started bringing people to him. Gradually, he quit that job, and he started having patients, and he helped so many people.
Many people from this area have gone to him.
Yes, like hundreds. And so, but then I had a plan because I knew what an amazing doctor he was. So that my next step was I was going to be his apprentice, and I was going to learn to do what he does. So I figured that this was a setup. Like I rescued. You know, I proved myself worthy. It's like a fairy tale. Your princess is locked up in a castle, and like I promised you I'd get her out of the castle and rescue her, and then I did. And then she came there, and I thought, oh, this is working out so great. I'm so worthy. and then I said, when they got together, you know, there was a party, and during the party I couldn't wait. And I said, Wang, would you teach me? Would you be my teacher? Can I be your apprentice? And he said, no. He said, no. And that's kind of funny. And I know why, because he doesn't speak English well enough or different reasons. But anyway, so then later I said, well, then I was thinking, you know what? We should write your story.
And that's how the book started. And you went over to Vietnam, and you saw a lot of places where he lived and got the experience of Vietnam. Yet another culture that you were part of.
Right. I met some of the characters in the book.
Right. Yeah. Yes, and the book is still in print. It's still available, and it is a remarkable book. And I think at one time it was even optioned for a movie.
It was. So basically the reason why it's kind of really a good book is because it's about magic.
It is. It's an unbelievable book, and it is about magic, but it's also in the real world, and it's a time when many of us remember what it was like before and after the war. And for him to be here in America doing what he's doing is really incredible. So thank you for writing that book.
You're welcome.
And so coming back around to Shiatsu, And you've been practicing here in town for at least 30 years, I think. And can you just give us a little snapshot of what Shiatsu is? I think a lot of people think it's something like acupuncture, something Asian, and
Well, Shiatsu developed in Japan, and it used to be Japanese doctors would diagnose through touching and also treat through touching. They would do the treatment. And whereas in China, they kind of went into needles. They started to use needles. So, but Japanese really maintained this tradition using their hands. Shiatsu, on the skin, you know, there's muscles and in Shiatsu you can work on the muscle layer, but there are pathways in the skin that if you focus your attention, you can access the lungs. You can access the bladder. You can access the kidneys, you know, the heart. And I had an awakening about this when I was first learning Shiatsu. I was still in school. I was in my 20s. And I had a friend, Aurea. She was a nurse. And she was in the hospital having an acute asthma attack. And they wouldn't let her leave. She could hardly breathe. I got a phone call and she said, "Margie, get me out of this hospital. I don't care, just get me out of here." And I said, "Oh, okay," you know. So I went and I got her, and we had a four-story walk up. She could hardly breathe going up this thing. So I said, "Aurea, I'll try my Shiatsu on you. Why don't you lie down?" And all I did was I worked, the lung meridian goes from the thumb, and it goes up to here, and it goes up to here. It goes all over the body, but I just worked on these. I was holding these, and what this is I'm communicating. It's an access to communicate. There's a communication that happens because there's another consciousness there. My consciousness is here, so there's able to make a connection. There's a communication happening.
Right.
So 10 minutes later, she started to be able to breathe again. And then I thought, do you realize how many drugs they pumped through her? And it didn't even, and how much, what a bill she's going to get? $1,000, $2,000, I don't know how many thousands of dollars she's going to pay, pumped through with drugs. And all I had to do was this for 10 minutes. And I thought, okay, I'm sold.
And you continued studying and practicing, and you got a lot of great results from that. So it's different from acupuncture, but it's sort of based on the same kind of principles. Is that true?
Yeah, you use
the meridians and all.
You use your you know it's acupuncturists. Good acupuncturists also use their focus and their mind when they put the needle here. You know, there is a kind of an energy. Just your mind in Chinese medicine. Just your mind, your imagination, just what you're thinking is like an energy source. So that activates something because that's how we're built. So there is an element of your intention.
And I would think that the people who come to you as students to be taught this already have some kind of a connection to this kind of experience of the human body and treating in that way.
Oh, the students, this group, all the students, they're attracted to that. They have a beautiful healing touch. Each one is different. It's almost like wine. You know what I mean? Everyone is just wonderful. You want to try all of them.
Yeah, that's great. And the other thing that I think is so great is that what you've done is you've created this Zen Shiatsu Express, which is...
Oh, yes. So we just acquired the storefront because Kim over at Molly's Son encouraged me to add on to our space, which is in the Midtown Mall.
Right.
It's in the Midtown Mall. So we were in the hallway there, but we extended all the way to the street with the storefront. So we added that on. So that is a place for the students to start working in their new profession. And they're like it's an apprenticeship because we meet once a week and we discuss things and we try things and we give each other feedback of how things feel and we discuss case studies. But it's the students' apprenticeship is the Zen Shiatsu Express, and we wanted to make this affordable for just anybody. So it costs as little as $20 for a session or $30. In the Express, it's so people can try it out, and maybe they can't afford, you know, to pay for an hour, but at least they can go regularly for 20 minutes once a week or something, or once every other week.
Yeah, and they can experience it. So somebody wakes up with a raging headache and they think, oh, Zen Shiatsu Express, is that the kind of thing that you can do as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great. That's great. That's good to know.
Yeah, we're very good at headaches.
That's great, Margie. So thank you so much. You know, I love the idea that, you know, you've been through so many different experiences and traveled so much, and this whole, you know, quest that you had, you know, to find out, you know, where you really felt at home, you know, or where family was. And it really feels like the center and the school is a real place for you now, and coming to that.
It's so wonderful.
That's so great.
Thank you. I'm so glad that many people can come in and be there too.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. Thanks for being on the show.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me, Wendy.
Thanks to all of you for joining us today. And Marjorie's information will be at the end of the show about the Shiatsu Center. And we will see you next week.